that are making the rounds this season. And this is at the invitation of the minister to his office at Jubilee House. And so this is what happened and how it went down. Hello and welcome back to GTV Breakfast. Today we are marking time and we are marching forward. It's been nearly 6 months since the current administration took office following a hotly contested 2024 general election. The campaign was anchored on a number of promises: an economic reset, job creation, and a 24-hour economy to lead that charge. Improvement in healthcare and education were also promised. Today, we are asking, how far have we come? Are we on track? Or are the promises beginning to blare under the pressure of the opposition or public expectation? From Jubilee House in Accra, Minister for Government Communications, Honorable Felix Kwakye Ofosu, who also represents the people of Abra Asebu Kwamankese, will answer some of our questions on how far the government has come and the aspiration in the days and months ahead. Honorable, thank you for making time to join us or inviting us into your office for this conversation.
Well, the pleasure is all mine, and I'm happy to have you.
The Ghanaian people are looking at this hourglass and they are telling themselves it's almost 6 months since we gave the reins of power to the NDC. Are we seeing the change that we voted for?
Oh, absolutely. I think that all facets of Ghanaian society would agree that there has been a significant shift from the way that things were done prior to the coming into office of President Mahama. On the economic front, on the social front, and on about every other front, we see clear, measurable change. One of the things that dominated the discussions around the elections was the state of the economy. Particularly of interest to the people of Ghana was the issue of economic hardships, the escalating price of goods and services, and the general cost of living. So we made a firm commitment to reverse that. President Mahama was very emphatic about doing something about it. And indeed, in the last 6 months, everybody will testify that there has been, at the very least, a significant slowdown in the way that the cost of living was escalating. Everybody sees that significant stability has been brought to the Ghanaian economy. All the important metrics, inflation has come down. Only yesterday, the Ghana Statistical Service announced that producer price inflation has come down to 10.25% or so. Inflation itself is hovering around 18%. We expect it to come down further when the next set of data is released. Our public debt, which was a major concern in the past, owing to the appreciation of the cedi, has come down by at least 150 billion Ghana cedis. If we check our budget deficits, which was also a major concern, we are now in the region of budget surpluses, at least from the last statistical bulletin that the Bank of Ghana put out. If you look at the general price of goods and services on the market, you find a significant reduction. Fuel price has gone down on 8 consecutive occasions since the beginning of this year. Several items on the market have reduced. Many manufacturers, those in the brewery sector, manufacturers of iron rods, and other important commodities have all had costs to reduce their price, and this reflects the general improvements in the Ghanaian economy. Of particular note has been the performance of the cedi, which has gained sufficient grounds against major international trading currencies, particularly the dollar. At the last reckoning, the cedi had gained close to 25-26% on the dollar, and this has been the result of deliberate government policy in that we have moved to address what was the underlying problem that led to the rapid depreciation of the cedi under the previous administration, which was the issue of demand and supply. There simply wasn't sufficient foreign exchange on the Ghanaian market, and therefore whatever was available was sold at a certain premium. Now, through the gold board arrangements, we are having sufficient liquidity in terms of foreign exchange, and that is what has accounted for the cedi's gains. We hope to maintain that so that in the medium to long term, Ghanaians reap the benefits from this. Only yesterday, the Minister for Education was here, and he gave a tall list of interventions that have been introduced in the education sector. You are a woman, and I'm sure you'll be interested in the free sanitary pad program. You know that period poverty. I know that your station has covered that on many occasions. You have gone down to the nooks and crannies of this country and brought us compelling stories about how young girls are unable to go to school because they cannot afford sanitary towels when they have to, as it were, go through their menstrual cycle. It was a major concern. The education minister revealed yesterday that millions of Ghanaian school children have benefited from millions of packs of sanitary towels. He disclosed, for instance, the issue of feeding in schools. It was a major problem. Every now and then there were concerns about the quality of food that our children were having and the non-availability of food in general. He disclosed that within the last 6 months, up to 600 million Ghana cedis has been released to the schools. And you know that we've introduced a decentralized system where the schools at least buy perishable items, whereas the buffer stock company also provides grains to complement their efforts. He spoke about the National Research Fund, which has been set up with about 50 million Ghana cedis given to them from Get Fund to enhance research in various institutions in Ghana. He spoke about the no-fee stress policy. As of yesterday, the minister recounted that 129,000 Ghanaian tertiary students had registered and accessed the portal, and disbursement of monies will start very soon. This is aimed at relieving the pressure that parents feel when their wards have to enroll in tertiary institutions, and it's a significant development which did not used to be the case. Our brothers and sisters who unfortunately have to contend with disability have not been left out. Significant sums of money have been set aside to cater for their fees as well. If you come to health, I just left a discussion with the health minister. He has indicated how efforts are underway to ensure that there's legislative backing for what we call Mahama Cares, the Ghana Medical Trust Fund, into which hundreds of millions of Ghana cedis will be allocated so that our compatriots who suffer from non-communicable diseases, chronic diseases like hypertension, cancer, diabetes, and what have you, have a source of funding. Because you know that in recent times it has become a major issue. Several months ago, we learned about the unfortunate closure of the renal center at Kolebu due to inadequate funding and all the problems that are associated with it. There are many parts of this country where facilities for such services do not exist. So the Mahama Cares program, the Ghana Medical Trust Fund, has been set up to ensure that there's a consistent line of funding to take care of such emergencies. So in a nutshell, I would say that the last 6 months have been hugely successful, perhaps the most successful first 6-month period of any government under the Fourth Republic, if you compare it to the enormity of the problems that we had to contend with when we took over the reins of power.
Let's try to unpack this one layer at a time from the long list that you've given us, and let's start with the appreciation of the cedi and the gains that the local currency has made. You mentioned against major international trading partners. The question is, are these gains sustainable, and why should you get credit for it? Your friends on the minority side say the kind of improvements we are seeing do not happen overnight. They will not happen within a 6-month period if seeds had not been planted several months prior to your coming into power. Well, how do you answer those?
Well, they had all of 8 years to do whatever it was that was necessary to keep the cedi stable. Mind you, they came into power in 2017 or so, promising to stabilize the Ghanaian currency. What we had was unprecedented depreciation. Indeed, in 2022 alone, the cedi lost about 54% of its value. It's essentially crashed. It was the worst performing currency in the world. At the time, they had already been in power for 6 years. We have found a solution to the perennial problem of shortages of foreign exchange. We know that there are traditional ways through which we get foreign exchange, but we, for instance, targeted the gold sector. What was happening is that small-scale miners were taking gold out of this country in a manner that was unaccounted for, and therefore the proceeds did not come to a center for, if you like, equitable distribution within the market. So under the gold board arrangement, we have made it mandatory that all small-scale miners must surrender the gold that they mine to the gold board, who then in turn purchase it with cedis, export it for dollars, and then bring it onto the Ghanaian market. So the Bank of Ghana keeps some to shore up their reserves. Part of it is released onto the foreign exchange market. Part of it is then used to settle our obligations that have to be met in foreign exchange.
And indeed, that's your sustainability plan?
Indeed, in the last 4 months alone, more than $3 billion has come into the country, in addition to what would originally have come. The gold board arrangement is here to stay, and therefore it is not an ad hoc short-term measure that we've implemented. That is one of the ways that we are ensuring that the gains that the city has made is sustained over the medium to long term. The president has indicated that at a certain point it will hover within a certain band, and that should be the natural place that the city should be. But it certainly won't go to the levels that brought untold hardships to the people of Ghana because of our import-dependent status. As we work to reverse that, meet our needs, and do import substitution, and then ultimately transition into an export-oriented economy, we have to manage the exchange rate, and that is precisely what we are doing. So my response to the claims by our friends in opposition is that if they indeed had measures to arrest the decline of the city, it would have reflected in the 8 years. It is not possible for they to have failed in all the 8 years that they were in power, only for them to have succeeded in the 6 months that they've been out of power. I don't think that this jives, and that it makes sense to the average reasonable person out there.
Let's talk about cost of living for a minute. You mentioned a number of ways in which the prudent economic policies you are putting in place is easing the burden on Ghanaians. Do you feel that the average Ghanaian feels the weight lifted off their pockets when it comes to cost of living itself? Because these things have somehow, for some, not translated into a reduction in prices of basic goods on the market. And so for those people who hold that view, all these things that you're talking about are not reflected in their households, and they feel a disconnect between government communication and the prices of goods and services on the market.
Of course, the pass-through time could be quicker. We must admit that. But I don't think that anybody can deny that there has been substantial relief in the price of important commodities. For instance, take fuel. And fuel is a determinant of pricing in many ways, because the trade that many people engage in revolves around transportation. And so once transportation costs are high, it is passed on to the end consumer. You do know that because the price of fuel has fallen consistently, indeed, only last Monday, the price of fuel fell again. There are fuel stations that now sell petrol for under 11 cedis. When we came into power, it hovered around 15 cedis. There were some who even sold it at 16 cedis. Now you go to places and it is sold for 10 cedis, 29 pesos or so. That is a significant reduction. That has also resulted in a 15 percentage point drop in the cost of transportation, which was announced by the GPRTU about 2-3 weeks ago.
Which not all the drivers implemented.
Well, but a significant number of drivers, because they fall under the banner of the GPRTU. And you know that GPRTU is the leading transport organization in this country in terms of size. So clearly, it is something that has translated into meaningful reductions for the people of Ghana. Of course, there may be some recalcitrant ones out there. Perhaps we have to find a way to address their recalcitrants. But in the main, I think that anybody would find it hard to dispute the fact that there has been significant reductions in the cost of living. So on a daily basis, you hear announcements about reductions in the price of items. The breweries actually came out to state that some of their products have reduced in terms of prices. Iron rods, for instance, because it is necessary, because the construction industry is important to our economy. That is what translates into rents and what have you. A ton of iron rods doesn't sell the same now as it did 6 months ago. There has been a reduction in the cost of living.
Whilst we are on the fuel situation, perhaps we should zoom a bit more into the energy sector and the attempt by government to fix DUMSO, a key campaign promise.
Yes.
Via the introduction of what some have now called the DUMSO levy. Government appeared to have made a U-turn on the implementation after key stakeholders, including oil marketing companies, came out to say that engagement had not been made, which would inform the next pricing window of an increase or a decrease in fuel prices?
Let me begin by saying that the name of the levy is the Energy Sector Levy, ESLA. It was an increase. So any other name that anybody gives it is unofficial. But that is even beside the point. The point is that we had sought to take advantage of the consistent drop in the price of fuel to introduce an adjustment that enables us reap significant revenue to address what is a major shortfall in financing the energy sector. So at all material times, the intent has been to introduce it in a manner that does not impact significantly on the consumer. Because if prices were dropping anyway and you adjusted it by 1 cedi, the net effect will be at most a minimal increase that does not impact too much on the consumer compared to what they were paying before we came to power. So that even if the levy was introduced, people will still pay much lower prices for fuel than they did.
That both governments have agreed that has not, ended up solving the problem for which the levies were introduced.
Again, you need to delineate.
Where is the confidence?
You need to delineate the issues carefully. When we introduced ESLA and managed it, there was no difficulty. The difficulty has arisen because of the mismanagement of ESLA by the government that we replaced. That fact must be placed on record. At a point, they were spending hundreds of millions of Ghana cedis out of ESLA to pay pensions, which had nothing to do with the object of the levy. We don't have a track record of mismanaging ESLA. So when you say both governments have complained about ESLA, it is not entirely accurate. One of the things that we must do, and especially for people like yourself in the media, is to pinpoint what the issues are. And the issue is that the previous government was reckless. We left them a fund, ESLA, which accrued in excess of 40 billion Ghana cedis over an 8-year period. And yet they left us with a colossal 67 billion Ghana cedi in debt. I mean, we all know the state of the Electricity Company of Ghana. You see, on top of all of this was a political decision which has resulted in more difficulty. You see, the electricity price that you and I pay does not factor in the cost of fuel. Yet, every single year, we spend $1.2 billion, which is something in the region of 12 to 13 billion Ghana cedis per annum, to buy liquid fuels in order to fire thermal plants that generate electricity. And yet, when they price it, they don't factor this in. In addition to this is what we call capacity charges, which are supposed to be factored into the tariff. But politically, a decision was taken to exclude it. So even from the start, assuming that those who produce and generate and supply power in Ghana get all the money that is due them, that deficit permanently remains, and it becomes a significant strain on public finances. So the whole idea of the 1 cedi adjustment in ESLA was to address this shortfall so that we guarantee ourselves consistent energy supply with the firm assurance that we will dedicate those funds to the specific objective for which they were charged in the first place, so that we don't go back to the period where we were accruing debts that we could not properly account for. So we need to understand this and put this in the proper context in order not to give opportunity for those who mismanage the sector to seek to share blame. I don't think that we can be blamed for any of the problems that we face.
What some call a U-turn on the decision,
well, there's no U-turn.
Postponement or a suspension of the implementation.
There's no U-turn. If you check the memorandum that was sent to Parliament to explain the levy, it was clear that we were hoping that the consistent drop in the price of fuel will offer us a certain cushion, so that when it was implemented, it won't impose any hardships on the people of Ghana. Just as we had planned to introduce it, which was this past Monday, this unfortunate rise in tensions between Israel and Iran arose, which then meant that there's a likelihood of an increase in the price of crude oil, or if you like, petroleum products on the international world market. And therefore, we needed to hold on to observe the trends before introducing this levy. Otherwise, we may end up with a situation where it takes the price of fuel beyond the ability of the Ghanaian to afford.
The same government that chastised the previous administration for using Russia-Ukraine as
I have not made any excuse. You see, again, I have cautioned that those of you in the media must delineate the issues carefully.
But these are sentiments that are out there.
First of
so
all, the Ghanaian economy,
the
Ghanaian economy did not crash because Russia went to war with Ukraine. By the time that war occurred in 2022-2023, I believe, the Ghanaian economy was on the decline, major decline. What had happened is that the previous government had mismanaged the economy. They had mismanaged our finances, incurred huge unsustainable debts, to the point where we were spending 92% of all tax revenue to service debt. As I speak, the Ghanaian economy is doing well.
Okay.
Has the Ghanaian economy suffered the same fate it suffered under the MPP? Despite, indeed, in the first few days of the war, the price of fuel dropped in Ghana. The reason being that the exchange rate, which is one of three components of pricing, the other two being the price of crude oil or petroleum products on the world market, and taxes. The exchange rate had improved such that even if you bought fuel for a higher price on the world market, chances are that it was not going to impact significantly on the price of fuel. It does not mean that a point may not come because of this war, that the price of crude oil goes up. That is not controlled by the Ghanaian government. What we control is the exchange rate and taxes. Under the MPP, those two things that they controlled went out of gear. The exchange rate, they essentially destroyed our currency.
Some people have argued that the number of ministers are less, but you've made up for those numbers by appointing persons to other government agencies. So I guess my question is, what tangible savings or gains have we made by the reduction in the number of ministers, if indeed you've made up for them via appointments to other government agencies?
Again, you see, that narrative is false. And I keep on referring to the need for scrutiny of claims that are made by the opposition, much in the same way that you scrutinize what we say. To begin with, you see, mathematical certainty. There are some things that are so straightforward that you don't even waste your time arguing. If in the past somebody had 126 ministers, and then now somebody has 56 ministers, do you need to be a rocket scientist to see that that alone means a reduction in the cost of maintaining ministers? Do you know what it takes to maintain a minister? You see, if I show you my appointment letter, apart from my salary, they will tell me I'm entitled to a 4-wheel drive, I'm entitled to a saloon car, I have to be given accommodation, and then other incentives. And the amount of money that the MPP ministers took hasn't changed. We are taking the same thing now. So on that basis alone, if you do the analysis, you see that there's a change. Let me give you another statistic. In this very house, Jubilee House, apart from the civil servants who are seconded from other places, so that do not necessarily impose additional cost, there were 336 political appointees occupying various offices here. As I speak to you, President Mahama has taken an axe and put it to that number. He has halved it. So when we go to Parliament next year and we present the list to Parliament, you will see that it is just around half of what the MPP kept. Now let me also ask you, if you had 336 people benefiting from the same conditions of service that those in this government are benefiting from, and the number now is less than half of what they left, does it not tell you immediately that there has been a reduction? And the situation is the same for various places. Indeed, in an interview with the sister station, I pointed out that when we came to this very place, the Jubilee House, there were subscriptions to satellite television, in addition to the local channels that we watch. When we took stock of how much it costs to pay for the satellite subscription, we noticed that in a month, we spent 120,000 Ghana cedis just paying for subscriptions to satellite television, satellite channels in this house. President Mahama has cancelled all of that. And you know what 120,000 Ghana cedis can do? Let me give you a practical example. You know, you said I represent the people of Abrasibu Kamankesi. There are communities in AAK that whose water problems you can resolve with 1,000 Ghana cedis. And I have done that as MP. 1,000 Ghana cedis, because perhaps a pump is spoiled and you need to replace the part. Because of that, a community of about 100 people goes without water for 4 months. Yet here we were sitting in this house with a government that used to pay 120,000 Ghana cedis every month just for satellite television subscriptions. President Mahama has cut that. You have heard him say that fuel allocations to people outside of exclusive government activity has been cut. And you know the cost of fuel and how much it takes to fill a four-wheel drive. The houses that ministers live in, if you don't live in the government bungalow, you are given 20% of your basic salary as rent allowance. So if there were 126 people and now there are 56 people, do you think that the cost is going to be the same? So if anybody tells you that there has been no saving, again, the person is not being fair to the facts. The reality is telling all of us. Indeed, there is a man who even promised to run this country with system ministers. He is doing so with 56. Perhaps the first time in history that somebody has promised something and has actually done better than he promised. So, my sister, there is no dispute. It is indubitable that there is a vast improvement. If you check our budget, our goods and services and capex budget for this very house, the Jubilee House, has reduced by close to 420 million Ghana cedis over last year. That is significant saving, and that is the reason why we can allocate close to 550 million Ghana cedis to print 800,000 textbooks for Ghanaian school children. That's how come we can give 294 million to purchase sanitary pads for girls. Ghanaian so the savings that have been made here are significant. There are things that you can verify from the budget. So don't let anybody deceive. And again, this claim that we are making up for the reduction in numbers in which other agencies have more people than they actually need. Indeed, let me give you a practical example of myself. You have come here, so this is my office, right? And then the next one is a small office containing my stuff. I'm doing the work of the ESLA information minister and the spokesperson to the president, in addition to my parliamentary duties. The former information ministry, which used to be housed in that building around the Workers' College, had a minister, a deputy, and 76 directors and other staff. That ministry was scrapped. And now it is me, my deputy Shamima, Amma Pratt, who speaks for the vice president, and 5 other staff. If you put that together, that is what, 7. We are doing the work of 76 people. So if 7 people do the work of 76 people, are you going to spend the same amount of money doing it? So we need to look at these matters in proper perspective. Don't let anybody deceive you when the facts are staring you in the face. So there can be no question about the massive reduction in the cost of running campaign. President Mama was very clear when he was campaigning. Look at the number of ministries there were. He has slashed it. Now we have 23 compared to 30 or so under the MPP. So there's real tangible proof of all the things that I've told you, and I've given you the evidence to back him.
The promise for education, or one of the promises for education, was a scrapping of the double track system of free SHS.
Yes.
Another promise, as you've mentioned in the earlier submission, is for support for persons going into tertiary education, support for PWDs. And the Minister, Honorable Harun Idrisu, told us that some conversations are being had. When are we going to move beyond conversations to see actual disbursements happening to the students who are eligible? When are we going to see a stopping of the double track system and see actual infrastructure being put up to, make more room for students in the now overcrowded dormitories and school classrooms?
All right, so let me take the no fee stress first. I believe that's what you're referring to in terms of disbursement. You see, some have argued that, if you went to the university, say the University of Ghana or the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, my alma mater, the university can provide you a list of all students who are on their books. That is fine, but that list will not come with bank accounts into which you pay the monies that you have to pay them. So the reason why people need to register is that it comes with their banking details so that you can disburse the funds to them. And we need to have that analyzed, verified against the list that the universities provide, so that we avoid this phenomenon of ghost.
How long do you think that will take?
It should not take. I believe that disbursement should start in the next few weeks. The students will receive the monies that they need to receive.
Double track.
Double track. Again, yesterday the Minister of Education, he was here to address the press. He indicated that as of now, about 60 schools, contrary to the initial report of 25, it's actually 60, have been brought on board. Private schools, I mean. We want to see how it goes. You see, every policy that government implements must be means tested. You must see that it is a right decision that you've made. And the best way to do that is to do that on a small scale, so that based on the outcomes, you can scale it up.
How were the schools selected?
Well, I think that it was selected with geographical locations in mind and how convenient it would be as part of a pilot scheme to see how it goes. Ultimately, we are committed to removing the double track because it was a completely obnoxious policy that created difficulties for students and parents. At a point, it was even extremely difficult to follow the academic calendar, because students go to school for 2 weeks, they come home to sit there for 3 months, and you simply didn't know. There was no reliable academic calendar. That in itself was evidence of a major problem. Now, steps are underway to ensure that we regularize this and then take advantage of the facilities that exist in private schools to reduce the overcrowding. Because you see, the permanent solution to overcrowding, of course, is having enough facilities on all the school campuses. But you know that you can't do that in 6 months. It will take a bit of time. Fortunately, because of the uncapping of GET Fund, this year they should get in excess of 7 billion Ghana cedis, which then ensures that at least 3 billion of it is ring-fenced to finance free senior high school education. That is how come these days you don't hear about some of the problems that used to exist. I told you about the amount of money that have been released to the schools for feeding, 600 million Ghana cedis. That is unprecedented, and it comes regularly. And this time it goes to the schools.
Has complained that the quality and the quantity.
Yes, of course. We need to. Of course, you do know that.
We are hearing reports of squabbles sometimes between the contract holders and allegations of bias in the awarding of the contract processes.
Of course.
So there's a large impression out there that these contracts are given to women wings of the political parties.
I think you are mixing up two things. We were clear in our minds that centralized procurement of food items was problematic because it gave rise to corruption. There were needless delays. So it is better to have the schools managing themselves, of course, in conjunction with stakeholders in their locality. We have noticed that, of course, as with every other program, there are people who seek to profit from this, where the quality of food they are giving to the students is not desirable. And so we have to monitor, keep a close eye. Indeed, the minister disclosed yesterday at his briefing that he has asked the internal auditors at the Ghana Education Service to carry out an audit of the quantities and quality of food that is going to the schools. And that is aimed at ensuring that students get the best possible quality of food. There's no youth. And what has happened is that we are saying that for now, the schools should concentrate on procuring perishable items from nearby markets. Whereas Buffer Stock, which was set up as an agency to have the capacity to stock some of these food items in large quantities. So if they have it, they can send it to the school in a transparent, monitored way. That ensures that there's no shortage, there are no breakages as we used to have in the past. Whereas the schools take care of perishable items. Eventually, we will come to an arrangement that achieves the ultimate objective of ensuring that the food gets to the school, and that once it gets there, the best quality food possible is given to the students, and that there's no corruption or favoritism or any other kind of ill associated with the way that this is managed. So there's no U-turn. We've only reviewed it temporarily in order to forestall what we
How
believe.
long will this temporary
it is not likely to last long. Okay. And as I said, it is better to take your time to do things properly than to rush into implementing things that create more difficulties.
What does quality and quantity mean for basic school? Now we are talking this.
Well, basically, I think that there's a school feeding program, which I believe serves between 2 to 3 million pupils. Indeed, the whole idea of school feeding was to ensure that children of a certain age get nutritious meals, at least 1 meal a day. It had the unintended consequence of also attracting more children to school, because feeding had become a problem for many families. So we had the benefit of seeing enrollment increase. Indeed, at the last count, there were close to 6 million pupils in Ghanaian schools. I believe up to 2 to 3 million of them are fed on a daily basis. Unfortunately, we've had politicization of the school feeding program. You'll recall that in the past, the Dutch government was heavily involved in funding the school, but because of corruption, again, under an MPP government, they pulled the plug in terms of funding. So the Ghanaian government now has had to finance it wholly. It will take a bit of time to reform the system.
Are you working on those conceptions of bias?
I can assure you that there's strict monitoring. And wherever we pick a whiff of corruption or any underhand dealing, we are going to take the sternness of measures to ensure that our children get the nutritious food that they need. But what is certain is that those shortages that we used to have, the piling on of debts which used to hamper the smooth implementation of that program, will soon be a thing of the past because of the measures that we have put in place.
When should we expect the final report on the review of the free SHS? It's one of the key campaign promises that this policy will be reviewed. The NDC insists that a review is not a cancellation.
Absolutely.
And that it's to make things better. Where are we in that process?
Of course,
and when should the final decision be expected?
It was inexplicable that there were people in this country who believed that reviewing something means you had cancelled it. At the very least, you can consult a dictionary and you see that those two words are not the same. The point is that free SHS, no matter how well-intentioned it was implemented in a haphazard manner. The problems were glaring. Look, I ran for elections in AAK. There are 5 senior high schools in Abrasem. I had to take my own resources to buy sporting equipment for all 5 schools because they didn't have any. There were times when the children went for sporting events and they had to run barefooted because government could not provide such equipment. So I provided equipment for all 5 senior high schools. I've had to provide water for some of them. They complain about shortages in desks, their laboratories are out of shape and what have you. It was because of the way this program was implemented. It created such a strain on government's finance that they simply could not meet the basic needs of the school. We also had a problem of overcrowding, which was unhygienic, the insanitary conditions they lived in. And then there was double track, which brought even more confusion to the system. So it was absolutely imperative that something was done about it. We promised that we would do something about it. So the first point of call was to hold a national stakeholders forum on education, because as they say, 2 heads are better than 1. The education minister discloses that during the rounds that they did around the country, after the national event, there were regional events as well. Up to 2,000 reform proposals were slapped in. So a review was undertaken. Indeed, a couple of weeks ago, the final report was presented to the president here. So it will be looked into, and in the due course, you will find that some of the proposals that we find acceptable will be implemented in a manner that ensures that education achieves its purpose of providing our young people with relevant skills that make them competitive in this global
so no timelines yet on when?
Oh, I don't think that it is appropriate at this stage to put timelines to it. We have a 4-year mandate. You have begun to see clear improvements, at least in feeding in senior high school. You've seen that. We've just announced the expansion of the program to cover a certain number of private schools. The objective is to ensure that we decongest the schools entirely, so that you don't send your child to school only to find that they live in squalor and in conditions that are not suitable. So that is optimal, but I think that it will be done within reasonable time. That there will not be lengthy delays, if that is your fear. Yeah.
May we focus now on job creation?
Sure.
And youth unemployment particularly. Can you confirm how many jobs you've actually created? That was the promise to the Ghanaian youth, that you will create jobs. And how has the cancellation or the government's decision not to renew the Zoom Lion contract, how is it likely to affect plans to create jobs in sanitation, plans to keep the streets clean and the cities tidy as well? How many jobs have you created?
First of all, let me correct that the Zoom Lion contract has not been cancelled.
It's been you're not going to renew it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. If issues are raised with an existing arrangement and government looks into it and finds that there's some merit in changing the way things are done, there will be nothing wrong with it. But the president said during the time of the campaign that waste collection should be decentralized. He said that he will ensure that adequate funding reaches the district assembly, so they make their own decisions in terms of who to engage to collect their refuse, and that has been done. I can assure you that this year, and yesterday the president mentioned it, that an average of 25 million Ghana cedis will go to each district assembly. That means that up to 80% of the district assembly's common fund will go to the district assemblies. So they will be able to make investments in critical sectors like health, education, trade, and then take care of their sanitation.
What happens to subsidiaries of Zoom Lion who have worked with the company in the regions and the districts?
Well, as I'm saying, that
the old or expired contract.
Well, as I'm saying, all waste management companies in Ghana who believe they have the capacity to perform the assignment of collecting waste will have the opportunity to bid in a fair, transparent, open process.
Including Zoom Lion?
Absolutely, to convince the district assemblies about the ability to do their job. Once the assemblies peruse them, of course, based on specific guidelines and a framework that is developed, that is standardized, and they think that you, have a waste management company and you can do the job for the Accra Metropolitan Assembly, for instance, they will give it to you. Yes.
Now let's talk about the judiciary for a moment before we wrap up this one. And perceptions, long-held perceptions of government in power interference in the judicial process. We've heard this come up with the suspension of the Chief Justice. We've heard this come up after press conferences by the Attorney General and the OSP, and the cases that are currently ongoing, Charles Bisu, Ken Ofori-Atta and co. Why should the Ghanaian public trust that this is being done fairly and not for political gain, as some people want to assume?
My sister, I am not sure of any Ghanaian who would have a problem with any government institution carrying out its mandates in a transparent, open, and fair manner. Every government agency is subject to scrutiny. What most people don't know is that court processes are actually public processes. Everything that is filed in court is a public document that you can access. This is a duty of government through its law enforcement agencies to hold every public officer to account to the extent that there is evidence of wrongdoing. Now, the president has made it clear that whether you are in this government or you were in the previous government, to the extent that evidence is found that you have engaged in wrongdoing, you will be held to account. So when you come to power, listen, for instance, look at this. Look, again, you see, the Attorney General is a public official. He is required to take people to court on the basis of evidence that he can stand by. And that is why sometimes the Attorney General has had to brief people so that you need to understand why he is taking the decision. And indeed, it is not novel. Even President Trump, who was once president in the United States of America, a few months ago was standing trial. Before he was put on trial, the prosecutors who were handling the case openly engaged the American public to tell them why they had taken President Trump through this process. I was a young man when the O.J. Simpson case was on, and I recall clearly how the Attorney General at the time and his prosecutors, Marshall Clark and co., constantly engaged the public to apprise them of the reasons informing the decision to prosecute. Indeed, that court hearing was actually transmitted live for everybody to see. I have been to court in Ghana where proceedings have been transmitted live because of the need for transparency. So, like I was saying, court processes themselves are not opaque. You can get up, even if you have interest in the case or not, and go and sit in the courtroom to hear a case. In fact, media people, and I'm sure your broadcast station has a court correspondent. Why do you have a court correspondent? He or she goes to cover the court proceedings. Whatever is said there, he or she reports to you. So it is not like when you go to court, the public can't follow. So really, there's little distinction between what the prosecutors say in court and what they say publicly, except that no matter what the Attorney General says, if you, Thelma, are accused, you would have a right to respond to what the Attorney General has said outside or what he has said in court.
Do you think you are increasing public trust in, institutions or government arms like the Attorney General and Minister of Justice's office by some of these things?
Of course, you see, the public must be carried along in governance. We have had too much opacity in this country. Public officials don't hold the office they hold for the sake of it. As I sit here, I'm Minister for Government Communications. When a budget is drawn up for the agencies under my ministry, like yours, GBC, it is subjected to public scrutiny. People must see the reason why GBC is given X amount to operate, or GNA is given X amount to operate. At the end of the year, I must go back to Parliament to tell them exactly what you did with the money that you were given. Everybody who is taken to court, the reason why in fact you go to court is that you are given opportunity to state your side of the case. And indeed, especially in criminal proceedings, if the judge has a scintilla of doubt that what the Attorney General is saying may not be true, he will rule in your favor, even if there is other evidence that shows, because the standard is so high. Before you put someone in prison, the standard you have to meet in the criminal cases is so high. That's why they say beyond reasonable doubt.
I want us to spare a few moments to talk about what recently happened in the health sector with the strike by the nurses and the midwives.
Sure.
And their continued insistence that their demands are not being heard. Now that they've been convinced to go back to their post, and they have done so, what stage of implementation are we at when it comes to granting their requests, if not all at once, at least in a staggered and you know, tailored or organized manner.
Of course, in fact, that's the whole idea of engaging in negotiations, as opposed to going on strike and refusing to come to the table for discussions. So what, and let me indicate at the very onset that the government of Ghana, led by President Mahama, holds enormous respect for the sacrifices that our nurses make in order to keep our healthcare system running. Indeed, there are health professionals who have argued that a hospital can actually function without a doctor, but a hospital cannot function without a nurse. So our nurses are key cogs in the healthcare machinery. So we all agree that all categories of public sector workers or any other type of worker in Ghana requires sufficiently robust conditions of service in order to motivate them and compensate them for the effort that they make to help our nation develop and meet our healthcare needs. Of course, the proposals that are made should be such that their implementation will fit into the national budget. Because as it is said, I can only give you what I have. So if proposals are made and government finds that these proposals, first of all, have not been budgeted for this year, and so cannot be accounted for in terms of expenditure, otherwise it will create significant economic difficulties for us, or that if they are factored in the current state, it will impose a much higher burden.
Are you suggesting that the nurses have agreed to wait for these things in 2026?
I haven't said. What I have said is that the reason why it is necessary for everybody to sit around the table to negotiate is that we need to reach common ground on the matters, so that at the end of the day, everybody leaves with a full assurance that their end of the bargain will be met. So that is the stage that we are at. We are very grateful. We are very grateful that they've called off the strike. What it then means is that some of the difficulties that would have arisen have been averted. So subsequently, there will be further engagement to determine a position that is mutually beneficial for everybody. And I believe that when we get to that point, everybody will be happy.
There are several other healthcare professionals who are waiting for postings, and they keep commenting under our post when we make even unrelated posts or across social media and elsewhere, and they're asking, when should we expect to get posted? We are talking nurses, science, medical laboratory scientists, and other allied health professionals, all waiting. When is that happening?
Of course, in due course, in reasonable time, those who need to be engaged will be engaged. And it's a problem that we inherited, and everybody would appreciate that we will require a bit of time to resolve. At the last count, there were 45,000 trained nurses who were at home, and none of them were trained in a period that we've been in power. So it's a problem that we've inherited, and it's one that we will deal with, because ultimately we were elected to address these problems. So I will give assurance to my brothers and sisters who are watching that government has not forgotten them. We are deeply concerned about the plight. Indeed, we are a government that gained enormous support from the young people of this country, and some of those were people who were looking forward to an opportunity to working in the public sector or taking advantage of other job creation opportunities. And we remain committed to that firm stance, and we will in due course engage them in a manner that gives them sustainable income. Could
you tell me if you're continuing Agenda 111?
Well, I think that the president made it clear during the State of the Nation address.
How many are you working on?
That the quantum of resources required was in excess of $1.5 billion, which is a huge amount. Again, it goes to show the problems that you encounter if you put the cart before the horse. You see, that is why the Bible says that who builds a house without counting the cost? This is a government that said it will build 110 or 111 hospitals at a go, when they clearly did not have any source of funding. So they've created a conundrum that must be addressed. So the president has said that we perhaps may have to diversify the source of funding. It is not realistic to expect that we will get the $1.7 billion or $1.5 billion to invest in this, and that we are willing to engage stakeholders, missions, private investors, and other interested parties who may want to take up some of these hospitals, complete them, and run them in a manner that enables them to recoup the investment, even as we also make efforts to the extent that resources become available to complete those that are nearing completion. But the lesson we need to draw from that is that we as our people must be wary of populist sloganeering by governments. There's a reason why President Mahama has refrained largely from this sloganeering. You go chanting Agenda 111, and yet there was no agenda to find money to do it.
So that's still being
you create a huge problem to a succeeding government. But that said, we are in government to resolve problems. So it is one of the problems that we will resolve. And in due course, indeed, he has tasked the health minister to present a plan on how to address that problem. And in due course, that plan will be laid before cabinet for consideration. The Ghanaian public will be apprised of same.
For lack of time, perhaps my last question would be, and I wish we could talk about GBC and state-owned media,
talk about GBC, yes.
Because recently on the floor of Parliament, you've talked about the importance of making sure that not just the GBC, Graphic, Ghanaian Times, GNA, receive the necessary tooling that they need. Government itself engages private entities when the state institutions, the state-owned enterprises are there and have the capacity personnel-wise to do that. Is there a plan to change that, and how do you intend to make things better? Is it keeping the president up at night?
Well, for the president is mindful of the need to utilize assets that the state has. So there's no policy to go beyond state assets, as it were, and engage private sector players, except that as a government also, we cannot shut out the private sector. So we just have to be fair and have an even playing field that allows everybody to compete fairly. The state media, Graphic Communications Group Limited, the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, New Times Corporation, and the Ghana News Agency, among others, have a difficulty. You see, for GBC, you are required to play your role as a public service broadcaster. So what you do is essentially a service. So your orientation is not fully commercial, as opposed to private sector players who are set up for purely commercial. They don't have any public service obligations. Now, for many years, indeed, in the last 2 decades or so, you have not received any direct investment from government.
So when is help coming?
Help is on the way. Indeed, we are engaged in discussions at various levels to see how we can leverage some of your own assets to retool you.
What does leverage mean?
What it means is that you are an organization that has some assets that sometimes you may lose sight of. That can be leveraged in order to retool you.
Sell?
No, it doesn't.
Rent?
It doesn't necessarily mean so. What it is that you look at all factors that are available. There are options. So government, if it has money, can put in X amount into GBC or Graphic Communication Group or New Times Corporation. But all of you are state-owned, 100% state-owned. You belong to the people of Ghana. Everything you own belongs to the people of Ghana. So if at some point for 20 years you've not received any help from government in terms of investments, indeed, you need 2 OB vans that cost a total of 5 million euros. And I know that this request has been there since God knows how long. So you have to rent private OB vans at the cost of $15,000
sometimes
a day.
When you rent, you get our staff to come and manage.
Absolutely.
To do these national events sometimes.
It is not sustainable. So the point I'm making is that we have to be innovative and creative in how to retool you and position you to play your role so that you generate sufficient revenue to finance your own activities. Right? As I sit here, I'm not interested in finding government money to put into GBC. I want you to be able to generate your own resource so that you don't have to come to me for 1 cedi. Because it is at that level that I will be satisfied that you are living up to your aspirations. You have huge potential. Indeed, I say that you are better placed than any other media organization in Ghana to rake in revenue that enables you to sustain your operations. There is no other media organization in Ghana that has the capability and potential that you have. What it is that it remains untapped substantially. So there are discussions ongoing to see how we can do that. And in the fullness of time, these discussions will come to fruition. And you will see a dramatic change. But as I told you the last time I came to your studio, you also have to live up to expectation. You see, whereas you are state-owned, and therefore you may require some incentive from government, those incentives don't have to come on a silver platter.
But whenever we've been called upon to give personnel, whether it's to cover, the matches for FIFA, or whether it's for the 6th of March or for the inauguration day, where equipment have been brought from ABCD, the staff have always proven
true. Indeed,
that we have what it takes.
I will say without fear of contradiction.
Favorably
I will say without fear of contradiction that there is no media house in Ghana that is more professional than the staff of GBC. Your training is excellent. Your output is excellent. You have only been hampered by a lack of resources. So what I'm telling you is that there are things that you can do internally to improve upon your own operations, generate revenue to invest in your own operations, such that you will be head and shoulders above the rest, which is where we want you to be as a government.
For 120 days, you gave us a measure, a checklist to rate the government. People gave their own interpretations of what your performance in office has been. At nearly 6 months into the administration, what's your score?
Oh, I'm not one who likes to engage in score. You see, when it came to the 120 days thing, because it was specific, 25 promises, you could take them off and then ascribe
out of 100,
ascribe a score. But I think that it is fair to say that the majority of Ghanaians are happy with our output so far. We have been careful and deliberate in the way that we've honored our promises, so that we meet the needs and aspirations of the people. We remain committed to keeping the promises we made to the people of Ghana, most of which revolve around improving upon their livelihoods, the conditions of living, the standards of living, and making sure that the average Ghanaian is happy about the way that they are governed. We want to be transparent, we want to be accountable, we want to be open. We don't want the opacity of the past to prevail. And we want to implement policies that are well thought through, that achieve some qualitative value addition to the life of Ghanaians, as opposed to creating more problems than we came to meet. It is at that level that we can heave a sigh of relief and say that indeed we have achieved what we said we would. But for now, it is obvious that any honest analyst will tell you that we are on the right track, and we intend to remain on that track and do much better than we are doing now.
What is clear to me is that Ghanaians are not just listening, they are also watching.
Absolutely.
And they are rating.
Absolutely.
And they are comparing.
Absolutely.
And they are using themselves as the measure of how good things are going. And I believe that all Ghanaians will continue to do so and expect the truthfulness that the president promised in the lead up to the general election, and continue to hold you to your promise of resetting that Ghanaians, majority of Ghanaians bought into, that brought you to power. So, Honorable Minister, thank you for sitting with us today. I'll turn the hourglass over, because indeed the clock is still ticking. The 6-month mark may be just around the corner, but the rest of the administration has 3+ years to deliver on that promise to Ghanaians. And I'm sure that we will be back to interrogate some of the issues a bit further. Honorable Felix Kwakye Ofosu is the Minister of State in charge of Government Communications, and he represents the good people of Abra Asebu Kwamankese in Parliament. He's answered some of our questions on what some of the topical issues making their rounds in the news are, and I'm sure that you found some, if not all of them, quite insightful. Thank you for watching the segment. I am Thelma Taki. The Breakfast Show continues after this. Stay with us.